always said I was too quiet to succeed, so I let them find out on TV. Chapter 1. The Silent Observer. The fluorescent lights of Harrison and Associates hummed their monotonous tune as I sat at my desk in the far corner of the office, exactly where they'd placed me on my first day 3 years ago. The corner was quiet, which everyone assumed I preferred. They weren't entirely wrong, but their reasoning was, "Maya, did you even speak at the meeting today?" Jessica's voice cut through my concentration. She leaned against my cubicle wall, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the gray fabric partition. "I mean, I know you're shy and all, but you've got to put yourself out there if you want to advance here." I looked up from my computer screen, where I'd been reviewing the quarterly sales data I'd spent the last month analyzing. I spoke. I said simply, barely." Jessica examined her nails with theatrical concern. "Look, I'm just trying to help. You're smart, Maya, but smart isn't enough in this industry. You need presence, charisma. You need to make people remember you." She smiled, the kind of smile that was meant to soften criticism but never quite succeeded. "Anyway, just some friendly advice from someone who's been around a bit longer." Jessica had been at Harrison and Associates for exactly 4 months longer than me, but she'd already secured 2 promotions while I remained in the same position. Not because I wasn't good at my job. My performance reviews were consistently excellent, but because, as my manager delicately put it during my last evaluation, I needed to work on my executive presence. Executive presence, I'd learned, was code for being loud, assertive, and taking up space in meetings, even when you had nothing valuable to contribute. It meant speaking with confidence about things you didn't fully understand, and making sure everyone knew every minor accomplishment. It meant being like Jessica. After Jessica click-clacked away in her heels, I returned to my analysis. The data told a story that no one else seemed to notice. Our company's marketing strategies were fundamentally flawed, targeting demographics that were declining while ignoring emerging markets. The social media campaigns that Jessica took credit for were actually performing worse than our baseline metrics from 2 years ago, but she presented them with such confidence that everyone applauded. I'd tried to mention these issues in meetings before, but my voice got lost in the cacophony of louder opinions. The few times I managed to present my findings, they were met with polite nods and quickly overshadowed by whatever bombastic proposal came next. Eventually, I stopped trying to compete for airtime and focused on perfecting my work. "Too quiet," they said. "Not a team player," they whispered. "Lacks leadership potential," they wrote in my file. What they didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything. Every flawed strategy, every misattributed success, every ignored recommendation, not out of spite, but because data was what I understood. Patterns, evidence, truth. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Marcus. "Still coming to the thing on Saturday?" The thing was his birthday party, which I'd been dreading for weeks. Crowds of his friends, all extroverted and effortlessly social, asking me what I did for a living and looking disappointed when my answer wasn't interesting enough. I typed back, "Of course. Wouldn't miss it." Marcus had been my friend since college, back when we'd both been outsiders in our respective ways. He was gay in a conservative small town. I was the scholarship kid who didn't talk much. We'd found each other in the library during finals week of freshman year, both pulling an all-nighter, and had been inseparable ever since. He understood that my quietness wasn't shyness or social anxiety. It was simply how I processed the world. "You observe everything," he'd told me once. "Most people are so busy talking that they never actually see what's happening around them. But you see everything." He was right. I did see everything. I saw how Jessica took credit for the market research I'd spent weeks compiling. I saw how my manager, Robert, made promises to clients that our team couldn't possibly deliver on, then blamed us when projects failed. I saw how the company hemorrhaged money on initiatives that sounded impressive in boardrooms, but collapsed under the weight of poor planning. And I saw the opportunity when it arrived in my inbox at 4:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. The email was from a television producer named Patricia Chen, and the subject line read, "Exciting opportunity for industry professionals." I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam, but something made me pause. Maybe it was the way she'd addressed me by name, or maybe it was the timing, arriving on a day when I'd just been passed over for yet another promotion that went to someone less qualified but more vocal. "Dear Maya," the email began, "I'm reaching out because your name came up in our research for a new business reality competition show called Pinnacle. We're looking for talented professionals who understand their industries inside and out, and your work has been noticed by some of our consultants. Would you be interested in learning more?" My work had been noticed. By someone. Anyone. I read the email 3 more times before clicking the link to learn more about the show. Pinnacle was being produced by one of the major networks. A competition where 12 business professionals would compete in various challenges, testing their strategic thinking, market analysis, leadership skills, and ability to innovate under pressure. The winner would receive a $500,000 cash prize and guaranteed venture capital funding for a business idea of their choice. The website featured testimonials from industry leaders praising the show's format and promising that it would discover the next generation of business visionaries. There were video clips from the pilot season showing contestants presenting to panels of investors, developing marketing campaigns overnight, and navigating complex business scenarios. It looked like everything I was good at but never got credit for. I watched one clip where a contestant, a man in his 30s wearing an expensive suit, presented a market analysis to the judges. It was competent but surface level, missing several key factors that would have given him deeper insights. The judges praised his confidence and presentation skills but seemed to overlook the gaps in his reasoning. I could do better than that. I knew I could. But applying would mean putting myself out there in a way I'd never done before. It would mean auditioning, being on camera, potentially being judged and rejected by thousands of people. Everything my coworkers said I was bad at, presence, charisma, commanding attention, would be under a microscope. My mouse hovered over the application link for a full minute before I closed the browser. Who was I kidding? I wasn't television material. I was the person who got talked over in meetings, who everyone forgot to include in team photos, who ate lunch alone while reading industry reports. Television required the kind of personality I simply didn't have. I packed up my things at 5:30 p.m., as I did every day, and headed for the subway. The evening commute was crowded, bodies pressed together in the humid metal tube rumbling beneath the city. I found a spot near the door and pulled out my phone, intending to read the news, but instead found myself navigating back to the Pinnacle website. The application deadline was in 2 weeks. I looked around at the other commuters, everyone absorbed in their own worlds, their own phones, their own problems. Nobody noticed the quiet woman in the corner reading about a television competition. Nobody ever noticed me. Maybe that was about to change. When I got home to my studio apartment, I made tea and sat at my small desk by the window. The city stretched out before me. Millions of lights representing millions of stories, millions of people trying to make their mark. I opened my laptop and pulled up the application. The questions were straightforward: background, experience, why I wanted to compete, what made me unique. I started typing, and once I began, the words flowed. I wrote about how I'd been overlooked my entire career despite consistently delivering results. I wrote about my ability to see patterns others missed and solve problems others didn't know existed. I wrote about being tired of watching less capable people succeed simply because they were louder. I wrote for 2 hours straight, something I never did. Usually, I agonized over every word, second-guessing myself into paralysis. But this felt different. This felt like finally saying everything I'd kept quiet about for years. When I finished, I read through my application one last time. It was honest, maybe too honest. It revealed more about my frustrations than was probably wise. But it was authentic in a way I'd never been in professional settings, where I'd learned to make myself smaller, quieter, less problematic. My finger hovered over the submit button. You observe everything. Marcus's voice echoed in my mind. You see everything. I pressed submit before I could talk myself out of it. The confirmation email arrived instantly. Thank you for your application. We'll review it and contact you within 5 to 7 business days if we'd like to move forward with an interview. 5 to 7 business days of wondering and waiting and probably regretting my impulse. I closed my laptop and tried to focus on other things, but my mind kept returning to the application, to the possibility, to the tiny seed of hope I'd planted without meaning to. I didn't tell anyone I'd applied. Not Marcus, not my parents, not my coworkers. It felt too vulnerable, too likely to end in disappointment. Instead, I went to work the next day and the day after that, sitting in my corner, doing my job excellently while being systematically ignored. On the 4th business day, my phone rang during lunch. Unknown number. I usually let those go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Hi, is this Maya Rodriguez? A woman's voice, energetic and warm. Yes, this is Maya. Wonderful. This is Patricia Chen from Pinnacle. I'm calling about your application. Maya, I have to tell you, your essay was one of the most compelling we've received. Your perspective on being underestimated is exactly what we're looking for. Would you be available for a video interview next week? My heart hammered so hard I was certain she could hear it through the phone. Yes, I managed. I'm available. Perfect. I'm sending you a calendar link now. I'm really excited to speak with you more. Your background is impressive, and honestly, we need more people like you in the business world. People like me. People who were too quiet, apparently. After we hung up, I sat in the small park near my office. My lunch forgotten. A video interview. One step closer. One step toward proving that quiet didn't mean incapable. That observation was a skill. That success came in different volumes. I had 1 week to prepare, which meant 1 week to practice being seen and heard in a way I'd spent my life avoiding. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd applied to a television show to prove I didn't need to be performative to be valuable. But maybe that was the point. Maybe it was time to show that my kind of quiet competence could speak louder than anyone expected. When I returned to the office, Jessica was at my desk, looking at the papers on my workspace. "Oh, there you are," she said brightly. "Robert wanted to know if you could take on the Henderson project. I know you've got a lot on your plate, but you're so efficient, and honestly, I'm slammed with the Brightwell campaign. The Brightwell campaign that I'd developed the entire strategy for, which she was presenting as her own work." "Sure," I said, as I always did. "You're a lifesaver." Jessica beamed and walked away, leaving me with another project, another opportunity to do excellent work that someone else would claim. But this time I smiled as I sat down, because in 1 week I had a video interview. And if things went well, people like Jessica would learn that the quiet ones are the ones you should have been listening to all along. I spent the weekend preparing. Marcus called to finalize party plans, and I almost told him about the interview, but the words stuck in my throat. It still felt too fragile, too likely to disappear like every other opportunity I'd reached for. Instead, I promised to be there Saturday at 8 and spent my evenings researching everything I could about Pinnacle, about the judges, about what makes good television. The video interview was scheduled for Tuesday at 6 p.m. after work. I took a half day, claiming a dentist appointment, and went home to set up. I'd bought a ring light based on YouTube tutorials about video calls, positioned my laptop in front of my bookshelf so the background looked professional but personal, and changed into a blue blouse that looked confident without trying too hard. At exactly 6 p.m., Patricia Chen's face appeared on my screen. She was younger than I'd imagined, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything in my background immediately. "Maya, so great to see you. How are you feeling?" "Nervous," I admitted, because lying seemed pointless. Patricia laughed. "Good. If you weren't nervous, I'd be worried. Listen, I'm going to be straight with you. We've done hundreds of these interviews, and most people come in trying to be someone they're not. They put on a performance, and it shows. What struck me about your application was how genuine it was. So just be yourself, okay? Be myself." The person everyone said wasn't enough. "Okay," I agreed. The interview lasted 45 minutes. Patricia asked about my background, my biggest professional frustrations, times I'd been overlooked, and what I would do with the prize money if I won. She asked about my analytical approach to business problems and had me walk through a hypothetical scenario about a failing product launch. I forgot to be nervous halfway through. The questions engaged the part of my brain that I was actually good at: problem solving, pattern recognition, strategic thinking. I found myself talking more than I had in any professional setting in years, not because I was forcing it, but because someone was genuinely interested in what I had to say. "Last question," Patricia said, leaning forward. "Why television? You could prove yourself in a million other ways. Why this?" I considered lying, giving some safe answer about the opportunity or the challenge, but she'd asked for genuine, so I gave her genuine. "Because I'm tired of being invisible," I said. "I'm tired of doing excellent work that no one sees because I don't shout about it. I'm tired of watching people succeed not because they're better, but because they're louder. Television is the least quiet medium there is, and maybe that's exactly where someone like me needs to be, to show that we exist, that we're capable. That quiet doesn't mean weak or forgettable." I paused. "And maybe because a part of me wants them, everyone who ever talked over me or forgot I was in the room, to turn on their TV and realize they were wrong." Patricia was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "That," she said, "is exactly why you need to be on this show. Expect a call in the next few days, Maya. I think you're going to Los Angeles." Secured Chapter 2. The audition. The call came on Thursday morning while I was in the middle of reviewing the disastrous Henderson project that Jessica had dumped on me. My phone lit up with Patricia Chen's name, and I stepped into an empty conference room, my hands trembling slightly as I answered. Maya, congratulations. You've been selected for the final audition round. We're flying you to Los Angeles next weekend for in-person interviews with the producers and some preliminary camera tests. We're covering all expenses, of course. How does that sound? How did it sound? It sounded terrifying and exhilarating and completely surreal. That sounds amazing, I managed to say with something approaching composure. Perfect. You'll receive an email within the hour with all the details. And Maya, don't overthink this. You got this far because of who you are, not who you think we want you to be. Remember that. After hanging up, I stood in the conference room for a full minute staring at my reflection in the window. The quiet woman from the corner, going to Los Angeles to audition for a television show. The absurdity of it should have made me laugh, but instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope. Marcus's birthday party was that Saturday, and I'd decided it was finally time to tell someone. I arrived at his apartment in Brooklyn, carrying a carefully wrapped gift and a bottle of wine, steeling myself for the crowd of people inside. As expected, the place was packed with Marcus's eclectic mix of friends, artists, teachers, activists, musicians, all of them vibrant and loud and comfortable in their own skin. Maya, Marcus spotted me immediately and pulled me into a hug. I was beginning to think you'd bail. Never, I said. Happy birthday, old man. We're the same age, he protested, then studied my face. Okay, what's going on? You look different. Different how? I don't know. Less defeated? You've had this beaten down look lately, and it's gone. What happened? I glanced around at the party, at all the people who wouldn't miss me if I pulled Marcus aside for a few minutes. Can we talk privately for a second? His eyes widened with concern, but he led me to his bedroom, closing the door against the party noise. Everything okay? I applied to be on a TV show, I blurted out. A business competition thing. And I made it to the final audition round. I'm flying to LA next weekend. Marcus's mouth fell open. He stared at me for 3 full seconds before letting out a whoop of excitement that probably carried through the entire apartment. Are you serious? Maya, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't want to jinx it, and I guess I was afraid you'd think it was stupid, or that I wasn't cut out for it. Stupid? Maya, do you have any idea how smart you are, how good you are at what you do? He gripped my shoulders. You're going to destroy this competition. When do you leave? What do you need? Should we practice? I can be a judge. Let me be a judge. His enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself laughing. Next Friday, and I don't even know if I'll make it past the audition. They're selecting 12 people from probably hundreds. You'll make it, Marcus said with absolute certainty, because you're exactly what they don't expect, and that's what makes good television. Trust me, I've watched enough reality TV to know. We returned to the party, and Marcus, being Marcus, immediately announced my news to everyone in attendance. I wanted to be embarrassed, but instead found myself surrounded by people asking questions, offering advice, sharing their own experiences with auditions and competitions. For the first time at one of Marcus's parties, I wasn't invisible. You have to let us watch it together when it airs. One of his friends, a theater director named Simone, insisted. We'll do a whole viewing party situation. If I make it onto the show, I cautioned. When? Marcus corrected. When you make it onto the show. That night, lying in bed in my apartment, I let myself imagine it. Being on television, competing against other professionals, winning, proving everyone wrong. It felt like a fantasy, but it was a fantasy that had somehow moved into the realm of possibility. Work the following week was simultaneously easier and harder. Easier because I had something to look forward to, a secret source of excitement that made Jessica's condescension and Robert's indifference feel less crushing. Harder because I was constantly distracted, mentally rehearsing answers to hypothetical questions, imagining scenarios and how I'd handle them. On Wednesday, Jessica cornered me in the break room. You seem different lately, she observed, her tone suggesting this wasn't necessarily a compliment. More, I don't know. Distracted? Is everything okay? Everything's fine, I said, pouring coffee. Just been working on some personal projects. Personal projects? She laughed. Maya, you need to be careful about that. The company expects full commitment, especially from people at our level who are still trying to prove themselves. Our level. As if we were peers, when she'd been promoted twice while I remained static. I'm committed to my work, I said evenly. My performance reviews have always been excellent. Sure, but you know what I mean. It's about perception. If people think you're focused elsewhere, They won't invest in your development." She smiled her sharp smile. "Just looking out for you." I wanted to tell her that in a few months she might be watching me on television, succeeding in ways she'd never imagined. But I kept quiet, as I always did, letting her underestimate me one more time. Friday arrived with agonizing slowness. My flight was at 6 p.m., and I'd taken the afternoon off, this time admitting to a personal commitment rather than inventing a medical appointment. Robert had been annoyed but couldn't really argue. I never took time off, had weeks of vacation saved up, and always delivered my work on time. The flight to Los Angeles was my first time in first class, courtesy of the production company. I sat by the window, watching the country spread out beneath me, and thought about all the paths that had led to this moment. Every time I'd been talked over in meetings, every brilliant idea I'd watched someone else take credit for, every performance review that praised my work but questioned my presence. They'd all led here, to this plane, to this opportunity. I landed at LAX at 9 p.m. Pacific time, and a driver was waiting with a sign bearing my name. He took me to a hotel in Santa Monica, where I found a welcome basket in my room with snacks, a schedule for the next day, and a note from Patricia. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be intense, but you're ready for this. See you at 8 a.m. P. The schedule showed back-to-back activities: breakfast with producers, individual interviews, group activities with other finalists, camera tests, psychological evaluation, that was slightly concerning, and a final interview with the show's creator and executive producer. It was designed to be exhausting, I realized, to see how we performed under pressure. I barely slept that night, my mind racing through preparations and anxieties, but when my alarm went off at 6 a.m., I felt surprisingly calm. I'd spent my entire career being underestimated. This was just one more room of people who didn't expect much from the quiet woman. The difference was that this time, I was going to prove them wrong on purpose. The audition was held at a production studio in Culver City. I arrived to find approximately 40 other candidates, all dressed in various interpretations of business professional, all looking confident and polished and exactly like people who belonged on television. I felt my old insecurities creeping back. I didn't look like them, didn't carry myself like them, didn't have their easy charisma. Maya Rodriguez, a production assistant with a clipboard, approached. "Great, you're in Group C for this morning's activities. Follow me." Group C consisted of 8 people, including myself. We were led to a conference room where Patricia and 2 other producers waited. The others in my group immediately started networking, exchanging business cards, complimenting each other's credentials. I sat quietly, observing. "Good morning, everyone," Patricia began. "Thanks for being here. Today is about seeing how you think, how you collaborate, and how you present yourself. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for authenticity and intelligence. For our first activity, we're going to give you a business case study. You'll have 90 minutes to work together to develop a solution, then present it to us. The catch: you have to present it live on camera, and each person needs to contribute equally. Questions?" A man in an expensive suit raised his hand. "Are we being judged individually or as a team?" Patricia smiled. "Both. We want to see how you work with others, but also how you shine individually. The best teams make each member better." They distributed the case study, a fictional company losing market share to competitors despite having a superior product. We had to identify the core problems and propose a comprehensive solution covering marketing, operations, and strategic positioning. The group immediately erupted into discussion, everyone talking over each other, eager to establish themselves as the leader. I read through the case study carefully while they argued, noting details they were glossing over in their rush to seem decisive. "I think we should focus on social media," one woman declared. "That's where all the engagement is now." "No, it's clearly a pricing problem," the expensive suit man countered. "They need to undercut competitors." They went back and forth, building on each other's ideas without really listening, more concerned with being heard than being right. I saw the pattern I'd seen 100 times in my own workplace. Loud people making fast decisions based on incomplete analysis. 15 minutes in, I finally spoke. "Has anyone looked at the customer demographic data on page 3? The group paused, turning to look at me as if they'd forgotten I was there. "The data shows their core customers are aging out of their prime buying years, and they haven't adapted their product or messaging for younger demographics. It's not about social media or pricing, it's about relevance. They're marketing a product that worked 10 years ago to people who've moved on." Silence. Then expensive suit guy nodded slowly. "That's actually a good point. More than good, Patricia interjected from where the producers sat observing. That's the entire case study. Most groups spend the full 90 minutes dancing around the real issue. You found it in 15. The dynamic shifted after that. Instead of competing for airtime, the group started actually collaborating, building on my initial insight to develop a comprehensive solution. They started directing questions to me, recognizing that my careful analysis had value. By the time we presented to the cameras, I'd somehow become the de facto leader, not through force of personality, but through competence. Our presentation went smoothly, each member contributing their section. When it was my turn to summarize our findings, I felt the familiar anxiety of being on camera, but pushed through it. This was what I'd come here for, to be seen and heard. After the presentation, we had a break before individual interviews. Several people from my group approached me to exchange information, saying things like, "You really cut through the noise," and "I wish we had people like you at my company." It was surreal, being sought out rather than overlooked. My individual interview was scheduled for 2 p.m. I was led to a small studio where 3 people sat behind a table. Patricia, a man introduced as David, the show's creator, and a woman named Jennifer, head of casting. A camera was positioned to capture my reactions. David spoke first. "Maya, that was impressive this morning. You let everyone else exhaust themselves, then came in with the actual answer. Was that strategic?" "Partially," I admitted, "but mostly it's just how I work. I need to process information before I speak, which means I'm usually not the first person talking. People often mistake that for not having anything to say." "And how do you feel about that?" Jennifer asked. "Being underestimated, frustrated, tired, but also, I've learned to use it. People reveal a lot when they think you're not paying attention." David leaned forward, interested. "Tell me about a time you used that to your advantage." I thought about all the times I'd bitten my tongue, all the careful documentation, all the patterns I'd noticed while everyone else talked. At my current job, my manager promised a major client a product feature we couldn't deliver. In the meeting, I tried to raise concerns but was shut down. So instead of arguing, I quietly documented everything. The promise, the timeline, the technical limitations, the risks. When the project started failing, my manager tried to blame the development team. I had emails and reports showing I'd warned him from the start and had been ignored. He was demoted. I should have been promoted to replace him, but they brought in someone external instead. Still, he couldn't pin the failure on me. "Why do you think they didn't promote you?" Jennifer pressed. "Because I documented the truth instead of managing perception. I proved I was right, but I wasn't loud about it. They respect the person who causes the problem, but communicates confidently more than the person who quietly prevents disasters." David and Jennifer exchanged a look. Patricia was smiling. "You understand something that most people don't," David said. "Business isn't always about being the best. It's about being seen as the best." Which is fundamentally unfair, but it's reality. This show is designed to challenge that narrative. We want to see if someone with real skills but without the typical executive presence can compete with and beat people who are all style and no substance. "Think you can do that?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Even though you'll be on camera constantly? Even though you'll have to present, pitch, and perform in front of millions of viewers? Even though everything you've described, avoiding your entire career, will be required of you?" I thought about Jessica taking credit for my work, about Robert's condescending evaluations, about every time someone had talked over me like I wasn't there, especially because of that. The interview continued for another 30 minutes, diving deep into my background, my motivations, my fears. They asked about my family, supportive but never fully understood my career, my relationships, Marcus, a few other close friends, perpetually single, my dreams, to build something of my own, to be recognized for my actual capabilities. When it ended, I felt emotionally exhausted but oddly exhilarated. I'd been more honest in that hour than I'd been in years of performance reviews and networking events. The rest of the day was a blur of activities, team exercises, psychological assessments, more camera time. By 7 p.m., we were released back to our hotels with instructions to return the next morning for final callbacks. I ordered room service and sat on my hotel balcony, watching the Pacific Ocean in the distance. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "How's it going? Are you famous yet?" "Not yet," I typed back, "but maybe getting there." The next morning, we reconvened at the studio. Of the 40 candidates who'd started, only 15 remained for final callbacks. The energy was different, more nervous, more competitive. We were close now. One by one, we were called for our final interviews. When my turn came, I entered a room where David sat alone, the cameras off. It felt more intimate, more real. Maya, I'm going to be straight with you. You're not the obvious choice for this show. You're not the loudest, not the flashiest, not the most conventionally charismatic, but you might be the smartest person we've seen, and you have something we can't script or manufacture, a genuine chip on your shoulder. You want to prove something, and that makes great television. My heart was pounding. Are you saying, we want you on Pinnacle? If you accept, you'll need to take a 3-month leave of absence from your job starting in 6 weeks. We'll provide housing in Los Angeles, a stipend for expenses, and obviously the chance to win $500,000 plus funding. We can't tell you who else we're casting, but I can promise you'll be challenged. So, what do you say? What did I say? I said yes. Obviously, I said yes. Flying back to New York Sunday night, I felt like a different person. I'd walked into that audition as the overlooked analyst from the corner desk. I was leaving as one of 12 people selected to compete on national television. The quiet one was about to become very, very loud. Monday morning at Harrison & Associates felt like returning to a past life. I sat at my corner desk looking at the familiar space with new eyes. This place had made me feel small and insufficient for 3 years. In 6 weeks, I'd be leaving it behind. I scheduled a meeting with Robert for Tuesday morning. When I walked into his office, he barely looked up from his computer. Maya, what can I do for you? Please tell me it's not about the Henderson project. I know the client's been difficult, but I need to request a 3-month leave of absence. I interrupted. Starting 6 weeks from now. And that got his attention. He looked at me. Really looked at me. Perhaps for the first time in years. 3 months? That's quite unusual. What's this about? A professional opportunity. What kind of opportunity? I could have been vague, could have downplayed it. Instead, I met his eyes and said, I've been selected to compete on a television show called Pinnacle. It's a business competition. I'll need the leave to participate. Robert's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been concern about how this reflected on his management. A television show? Maya, I don't even know what to say. Is this some kind of reality TV thing? It's a business competition showcasing strategic thinking and industry expertise. I auditioned, and I was selected. Well, he adjusted his tie, flustered. I suppose we'll have to discuss this with HR. 3 months is a long time. I can't guarantee your position will be available when you return. I understand, I said calmly. I didn't add that I wasn't planning to return, that I was hoping to win enough money to start my own consulting firm, that I'd outgrown this place years ago. The news spread through the office within hours. Suddenly, people who barely acknowledged my existence were stopping by my desk, asking questions, wanting details. Jessica appeared, her expression a complicated mix of surprise and something that looked like jealousy. So I heard you're going to be on TV? She tried to sound casual. That's so random. How did that even happen? I applied. They liked what I had to offer. Right, but she floundered, unable to articulate why she found this surprising. You're just so quiet. I didn't think you'd be into that kind of thing. Turns out there's a lot you don't know about me, I said simply. That evening, Marcus insisted on taking me out to celebrate. We went to our favorite Thai restaurant in the East Village, the one we'd been going to since college when it was all we could afford. To Maya Rodriguez, he toasted, raising his beer. Future television star and destroyer of people who underestimate the quiet ones. I haven't won anything yet, I protested. I might be eliminated first. You won't be. You know why? Because you're the protagonist of this story, the overlooked genius who finally gets her moment. That's good narrative structure. They need you. I laughed, but part of me hoped he was right. The next 6 weeks passed in a strange limbo. I continued doing my job excellently, training my temporary replacement, tying up loose ends. But mentally, I was already gone, already in Los Angeles, already competing. The day before I left for filming, I cleaned out my desk at Harrison & Associates, packing up 3 years of my professional life into a single cardboard box. Robert had approved my leave reluctantly, making it clear he considered it an inconvenience. Jessica had oscillated between fake enthusiasm and thinly veiled resentment. Most of my coworkers had already forgotten about it, but I hadn't forgotten. I was carrying every slight, every overlooked contribution, every condescending comment with me to Los Angeles, not as baggage, but as fuel. Marcus helped me pack my suitcase that night. 3 months in LA, he said wistfully, living in a house with strangers, competing for money, being on camera constantly. It sounds like my personal nightmare. Mine too, I admitted. but maybe that's why I need to do it. Call me whenever you can. And Maya? He hugged me tightly. Show them everything they missed. The next morning, I boarded a plane to Los Angeles, to a life I never imagined, to prove something I'd been trying to prove my entire career. The quiet girl from the corner was about to step into the spotlight, and I was ready. Chapter 3. The Reveal. The Pinnacle House was in the Hollywood Hills, a sprawling modern mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. When I arrived with my single suitcase, cameras already rolling, I found myself walking into a carefully constructed reality. Everything was designed for television. Dramatic lighting, strategic camera placements, common areas that encouraged confrontation and conversation. I was the seventh contestant to arrive. The others were already mingling in the living room, drinks in hand, performing the ritual dance of reality TV introductions. I recognized some faces from the audition process. Others were new. They all had that same polished confidence I'd seen so many times before, the kind that came naturally to people who'd never been made to feel invisible. You must be Maya. A tall man with an aggressively firm handshake approached. I'm Brendan, Harvard Business School, currently heading up operations for a tech startup in Austin. You? Maya Rodriguez. I work in market analysis in New York. Market analysis, nice. Which firm? Harrison and Associates. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the way people's expressions always did when they realized I wasn't from Goldman Sachs or McKinsey or any of the prestigious firms that mattered. Cool. Well, good luck. May the best person win, right? He moved on to someone more interesting before I could respond. I took my suitcase upstairs to find the bedroom assignments. The house had 6 bedrooms, each shared by 2 contestants. My roommate was already unpacking, a woman around my age with perfectly styled hair and designer luggage. Hi. She extended her hand. I'm Clarissa Chen. Looks like we're bunking together. Maya Rodriguez. Where are you coming from, Maya? New York. You? San Francisco. I'm in venture capital. She said it the way people say, I'm a doctor, or I'm a lawyer. Like it explained everything about her worth. This is going to be such an amazing opportunity to network. I mean, the prize money is great, but the connections? That's the real value. I'd been in the house for 10 minutes and already understood the game. These weren't just competitors. They were exactly the type of people who'd been succeeding while I'd been overlooked my entire career. Confident, connected, convinced of their own brilliance. That first night, we had a welcome dinner where the show's host, Victoria Lang, laid out the format. Victoria was a successful entrepreneur and television personality, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. Welcome to Pinnacle, she began. Over the next 12 weeks, you'll face challenges designed to test every aspect of business acumen, strategy, leadership, innovation, execution. Each week, one of you will be eliminated based on your performance. The last person standing wins $500,000 and guaranteed venture capital funding for their business idea. She paused for effect, her gaze traveling across all of us. But here's what makes Pinnacle different from other competitions. We're not looking for who can perform the best under artificial conditions. We're looking for who would actually succeed in the real world. That means your performance in challenges matters, but so does how you conduct yourself, how you treat others, how you handle success and failure. The judges are watching everything. The challenges started immediately. The first one was announced that night. Each of us had 24 hours to develop a pitch for a product or service that solved a problem we'd personally experienced. We'd present to a panel of venture capitalists who would vote on the most investable idea. Everyone scattered to claim workspace and start brainstorming. I found a quiet corner of the library while others commandeered the dining room table, the kitchen island, the outdoor patio. Their voices carried through the house as they talked through ideas out loud, testing concepts on each other, forming early alliances. I thought about the problems I'd experienced, being overlooked, being underestimated, having good ideas ignored because I didn't present them with enough flash. But those weren't business problems, or were they? I spent hours researching on my laptop, digging into data about workplace communication, about how different personality types contribute to businesses, about the value being lost when introverted or quiet employees weren't heard. The numbers were staggering. Studies showed that up to 50% of employees felt their ideas weren't properly considered at work. That diversity of thought led to better outcomes, but required systems that didn't just reward the loudest voice. By 3 a.m., I had my pitch. A software platform that anonymized idea submission in workplace settings, using AI to evaluate concepts based on merit rather than presentation style or who proposed them. It would surface the best ideas regardless of who generated them, creating a more equitable innovation pipeline. I called it Level Voice. The next day, we presented in the house's dedicated presentation room, a small theater-style space with cameras everywhere. I went sixth after watching Brendan pitch a cryptocurrency platform, eye-roll-inducing, Clarissa pitch a luxury concierge service, solving problems only rich people had, and 3 others pitch various apps and services that felt derivative of existing solutions. When my turn came, I felt the familiar anxiety of being watched, judged, evaluated. But I'd spent months preparing for this moment, and years building up reasons to push through it. How many of you have had a great idea at work that was ignored? I began. Not because it wasn't good, but because you didn't present it right, or someone louder spoke over you, or you weren't senior enough to be taken seriously. I saw a few judges nodding slightly. I clicked to my first slide, statistics about lost innovation and workplace communication failures. Companies are hemorrhaging value because they've structured themselves to only hear from certain types of people. Level Voice fixes that. It's a platform where employees can submit ideas anonymously, and AI evaluates them based on data-driven metrics: market potential, feasibility, innovation, strategic alignment. The best ideas rise to the top regardless of who proposed them. I walked them through the business model, the market size, the competitive advantage, the implementation strategy. Everything I'd learned in 3 years of being the smartest person in the room, but the last one anyone listened to. When I finished, one of the judges, a woman named Sarah Mitchell who'd built and sold 3 companies, leaned forward. "This is personal for you, isn't it?" "Yes," I said simply. "I've lived this problem my entire career." "And that's exactly why this pitch works," Sarah said. "You're not solving a theoretical problem. You're solving your problem, which means you're solving thousands of other people's problems too." The voting happened that evening. We all gathered in the living room while Victoria revealed the results on a large screen. Each judge had ranked their top 3 pitches, weighted by placement. In 3rd place, Victoria announced, Clarissa Chen with Lux Life Concierge. Clarissa smiled graciously, accepting the moderate success. In 2nd place, Brendan Walsh with Crypto Connect. Brendan looked annoyed at being second, his competitive nature already showing. And the winner of the first challenge, with nearly unanimous support from our judges, Maya Rodriguez with Level Voice. The room erupted in polite applause. I felt a surge of something I hadn't experienced in a professional setting in years. Validation, not just for working hard or being smart, but for being right, for seeing what others missed, for having value that was finally being recognized. That night, the house dynamics shifted. People who'd barely noticed me suddenly wanted to discuss their business ideas, to get my thoughts, to form alliances. Brendan, who'd dismissed me with a handshake, suggested we team up for the next challenge if it's group-based. I was polite, but non-committal. I'd spent years watching people who ignored me suddenly want something once they realized I was useful. I wasn't here to make them feel better about their previous dismissiveness. The challenges continued week after week, each one designed to test different skills: market analysis, crisis management, product launches, team leadership, financial projections, public presentations. I didn't win every challenge. I came in 3rd during the leadership challenge, struggling with the performative aspects of rallying a team with motivational speeches. But I was consistent, never finishing below 5th, always delivering solid, smart, well-researched solutions. More importantly, I was learning to be visible, not by changing who I was, but by refusing to hide who I was. When others pitched with flash and confidence, I pitched with data and insight. When they led with charisma, I led with competence. The contrast itself became my brand. The cameras caught everything. The late nights in the library while others socialized. The moments when I'd sit quietly during house debates, then come in with an observation that reframed everything. The challenges where I'd let others exhaust themselves with bad ideas before presenting the solution. By week 6, we were down to 8 contestants. That night, we had what the producers called a reflection episode. No challenge, just interviews about our journey so far. My interview took place on the house's rooftop terrace, Los Angeles spreading out beneath us. "Maya, you've surprised a lot of viewers," Victoria said. "When you first arrived, you were barely noticeable. Now you're considered one of the frontrunners. How does that feel?" "Validating," I admitted, "and frustrating that it took a television show for people to pay attention. I've always been this capable. The difference is that here, The work speaks for itself. There's no office politics, no one taking credit for my ideas, no being judged on how loudly I speak in meetings. Do you think you've changed, or have people just started seeing you differently? Both. I've learned to take up more space, to trust that my ideas deserve to be heard. But also, the structure of this competition rewards actual competence in a way that most workplaces don't. It's easier to be visible when being good at your job is the actual criterion for success. What are you going to do if you win? When I win, I corrected, feeling bold, I'm going to build level voice. And I'm going to make sure that no one else spends years being the smartest person in the room, but the last one anyone listens to. Week 7 brought the team challenge I'd been dreading. We were split into 2 teams of 4 and given 1 week to develop and launch a complete marketing campaign for a real client, a struggling restaurant chain that needed rebranding. My team consisted of me, Clarissa, a guy named Devin who worked in advertising, and a woman named Priya who ran her own consulting firm. On paper, we had complementary skills. In practice, we had 3 people who wanted to be in charge and me. The first team meeting devolved into chaos within minutes. Devin wanted a social media-heavy approach. Clarissa wanted to target high-end customers. Priya wanted to completely overhaul the restaurant's menu and concept. They talked over each other, each convinced their vision was right. I sat back and let them fight, watching the patterns. Devin was all style, no substance. His ideas sounded good but lacked strategic foundation. Clarissa was thinking only about the customers she understood, ignoring the restaurant's actual demographic data. Priya had good instincts but was trying to solve too many problems at once. Can I see the client brief again? I asked, during a rare pause in the argument. Devin slid it across the table impatiently. I read through it carefully, pulling out the actual constraints and objectives they'd been ignoring in their rush to implement their pet solutions. The restaurant chain is in suburban locations, averaging 20 years old, with a core customer base of families and retirees. They're losing business to newer fast casual chains, not fine dining. Their problem isn't that they're not upscale enough, it's that they feel outdated. The table went quiet. So what are you suggesting? Priya asked. We keep their comfort food identity but update everything else. New visual branding that feels modern but warm. Social media presence that targets the kids of their existing customers. 30-somethings looking for places to take their own families. Menu tweaks that add healthier options without alienating current customers. It's evolution, not revolution. Devin frowned. That sounds kind of safe. It sounds like what the client actually needs, I countered. They're not trying to become a different restaurant. They're trying to stay relevant as the one they are. Clarissa nodded slowly. That actually makes sense. We built the campaign around my strategy, though not without friction. Devin kept trying to add flashy elements that didn't fit. Clarissa wanted to overcomplicate the execution. But I'd learned something in the previous challenges. How to be insistent without being aggressive. How to guide without being controlling. The night before our presentation, Devin cornered me in the kitchen. You know, when you first got here, I thought you'd be gone in 2 weeks. You were so quiet. I remember. But you've got this way of just cutting through all the bullshit. It's kind of annoying, actually. He smiled. But effective. Thanks, I think. It's a compliment. You're going to go far, Maya. Just don't let them make you into someone you're not. The quiet thing works for you. Our presentation went well. The client representatives seemed genuinely excited about the rebrand, and the judges praised our strategic thinking and cohesive execution. The other team had imploded into infighting and delivered a disjointed mess. We won unanimously. That week's elimination sent home 2 contestants from the losing team. We were down to 6. The final weeks were brutal. Individual challenges that pushed us to our limits. A crisis management scenario where we had to handle a fictional PR disaster in real time. A Shark Tank-style pitch where we had to convince real investors to fund a business in an industry we'd never worked in. A 24-hour product development sprint. I didn't win every challenge, but I never faltered. I made it to the final 3. Me, Brendan, and a woman named Michelle who ran a successful e-commerce business. The final challenge was announced with 2 weeks left. Develop a complete business plan for our dream company. Present it to a panel of industry leaders, and convince them we deserved the prize money and venture capital funding. Everything we'd learned, everything we were, distilled into one presentation. I spent every waking hour on level voice. I researched market data, built financial models, developed implementation timelines, created user experience mock-ups, mapped out scaling strategies. I interviewed former colleagues secretly about their experiences being overlooked. I built something real, something viable, something that mattered. The other finalists were equally focused. The house became quiet, everyone locked into their own projects. The camera crews captured us working late into the night. The dedication and exhaustion and determination. The final presentations took place on a stage in front of a live audience. Industry leaders, investors, press, and a studio audience of aspiring entrepreneurs. My parents flew in from Texas. Marcus was there. Even some former coworkers from Harrison and Associates, including, and this gave me particular satisfaction, Jessica and Robert. I was last to present. Brendan went first with his cryptocurrency platform. It was slick and confident and fundamentally hollow. A solution looking for a problem, built on hype rather than substance. The judges asked tough questions he struggled to answer with specifics. Michelle presented her expansion plan for sustainable fashion. It was solid, well-researched, genuinely impressive. She had clear market data, realistic projections, and a viable path to profitability. She was my real competition. Then it was my turn. I walked onto that stage, looked out at hundreds of faces, and felt every moment of my career that had led here. Every time I'd been talked over. Every brilliant idea I'd watched someone else take credit for. Every performance review that praised my work but questioned my presence. My name is Maya Rodriguez, I began, and I've spent my entire career being the smartest person in the room that nobody listened to. This is for everyone who's ever felt the same way. I pitched Level Voice with everything I had. Not with flash or performance, but with data and passion, and the bone-deep understanding that comes from living a problem. I showed them the market gap, the revenue model, the implementation strategy, the long-term vision. I showed them pilot program results I'd quietly conducted with 3 small companies who'd agreed to test the concept. I showed them a future where good ideas won regardless of who had them. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then Sarah Mitchell, the same judge who'd responded to my first pitch, started clapping. Others joined until the entire audience was applauding. The judges deliberated for 2 hours while we waited backstage. When they finally called us back, Victoria stood at center stage with 3 envelopes. "This has been one of the most difficult decisions in Pinnacle history," she said. "All 3 of you demonstrated exceptional ability and deserve to succeed, but there can only be one winner." She opened the first envelope. In third place, with $50,000 in prize money, Brendan Walsh. Brendan smiled tightly, shaking hands before leaving the stage. Down to 2. Both Maya and Michelle presented exceptional business plans. Michelle's sustainable fashion platform is innovative, well-researched, and financially sound. Maya's Level Voice addresses a critical market gap with a scalable solution and profound social impact. The judges were split, but ultimately, one presentation stood out for its combination of personal authenticity, market understanding, and transformative potential. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. The winner of Pinnacle, receiving $500,000 in prize money and guaranteed venture capital funding. Maya Rodriguez. The world exploded into sound and light. I heard Marcus screaming from the audience. Saw my parents crying. Felt Victoria hugging me as confetti fell from the ceiling. Michelle congratulated me graciously, genuinely happy despite her own disappointment. But what I remember most clearly was looking into the audience and seeing Jessica and Robert. Their faces were frozen in shock, the kind of shock that comes from having your entire understanding of someone completely upended. The quiet woman from the corner desk had just won a nationally televised competition and $500,000. I smiled at them, a smile that said everything I'd never been able to say in 3 years of being overlooked and underestimated. I'd let them find out on TV, exactly as planned. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new office, actual office, not a corner cubicle, in a co-working space in Manhattan. Level Voice had officially launched with 10 corporate clients signed for the pilot program. The venture capital funding had come through, allowing me to hire a small team. We were building something real. My phone buzzed with notifications constantly now. Press interviews, speaking invitations, LinkedIn messages from people at companies I'd once dreamed of working for. It was overwhelming and thrilling and sometimes still felt surreal. Marcus stopped by with coffee, as he did most days. "Have you seen the article?" "Which one?" "Business Insider. The Quiet Revolutionary. How Maya Rodriguez is changing workplace culture." He grinned. "You're officially a thought leader now. How does it feel?" "Weird. Good. Sometimes I still expect to wake up back at Harrison and Associates." Well, you won't. You know Robert tried to connect with you on LinkedIn last week? I laughed. I saw. I didn't accept. What about Jessica? She actually sent a long email about how she always knew I had potential and wanted to discuss partnership opportunities for Level Voice. What did you say? Nothing. Some people don't deserve a response. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the New York skyline. It was the same city I'd been living in before, but it felt different now. Or maybe I felt different. You know what the best part is? Marcus said. You didn't have to change who you are. You just had to find a place where being you was enough. He was right. I was still quiet, still observant, still more comfortable analyzing data than commanding a room. But I'd learned that quiet didn't mean weak, and observation was a skill, and there were multiple ways to lead and succeed and matter. My computer pinged with an email. It was from a woman named Sarah. No last name, just Sarah, who'd watched Pinnacle. Dear Maya, it read, I've been in marketing for 8 years, and I've spent most of that time feeling invisible. Watching you win gave me the courage to finally start the consulting business I've been planning for 3 years. I just wanted to say thank you for showing me that people like us can succeed without pretending to be someone we're not. I got emails like that daily now, from quiet people who'd been overlooked, from introverts in extrovert-dominated industries, from anyone who'd ever felt like they had to perform a version of success that didn't fit who they were. I replied to each one personally, Your voice matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. That evening, I had a video call scheduled with Patricia Chen. Since Pinnacle aired, she'd become a mentor of sorts, checking in regularly to see how I was handling sudden visibility. Maya, I've been following your press coverage. You're everywhere. It's a lot, I admitted. Sometimes I miss being invisible. Patricia laughed. No, you don't. You miss being underestimated because it was comfortable, but you were never meant to stay in that corner. I guess not. I called because I wanted to give you a heads up. Pinnacle was our most successful season ever. Viewership records, social media engagement, press coverage. And you know what drove most of it? You. People are fascinated by your story. The network wants to do a follow-up special in 6 months, checking in on the winner and how Level Voice is doing. Interested? I thought about it. More cameras, more visibility, more opportunities for criticism and judgment, but also more chances to show other quiet people that they could do this too. Yes, I said. I'm interested. After we hung up, I turned off my computer and sat in my office as evening fell over Manhattan. Through the window, I could see people rushing home from work, living their lives, fighting their own battles against being overlooked or underestimated. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your success. You deserve better from us. Robert. Too little, too late, but also proof that I'd done what I set out to do. I'd made them see me, made them regret underestimating me, made them recognize what they'd missed. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened my laptop one more time and pulled up the Level Voice platform. We had 43 ideas submitted by employees at our pilot companies in just the first month. Ideas from people who'd never spoken up in meetings, who'd been ignored or talked over, who'd stopped trying to be heard. We were evaluating each one based on merit, data, potential impact. The best ideas were rising to the top, regardless of who proposed them, just as I'd designed it. We were building a system where quiet people didn't have to become loud to succeed. They just had to be right. I thought about that girl from years ago, sitting in the corner of Harrison and Associates, watching less capable people succeed because they were louder. I thought about how many times I'd doubted myself, wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe I was too quiet to succeed. I wished I could go back and tell her what I knew now. Being quiet isn't the problem. Being ignored is. And you don't fix that by becoming someone you're not. You fix it by refusing to accept that loudness equals value. You fix it by being so undeniably good that eventually they have no choice but to pay attention. You fix it by letting them find out on TV. My phone buzzed again. Marcus. Dinner tomorrow? We're celebrating 9 months since you became famous. I smiled and typed back, I'm not famous. I'm just finally visible. But as I looked around my office, at the business I was building, at the messages from people I was helping, at the future I was creating, I realized something. I'd spent years wanting to be heard, to be recognized, to prove that I deserved success, despite being quiet. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I'd already won. The end.